Donald Trump has been on a public tear against the New York Times and the anonymous source of the now infamous op-ed that suggested there's a resistance force in the White House protecting America from the president's darker impulses. Mr. Trump has also threatened legal action against the Times, and he wants the Attorney General to investigate and identify who the writer is. What's the legal standing for this? Let's talk about that with Ian Bassin. He served as an associate White House counsel to President Barack Obama, and he's also executive director of the Protect Democracy. He's in New York City. Ian, before we get into some things, briefly tell us what Protect Democracy is.
Protect Democracy is a nonpartisan nonprofit dedicated to preventing American democracy from declining into a more authoritarian form of government. I think we've all been watching this president with a great degree of alarm in terms of the way that he has railed against our norms and institutions. But it's important to recognize, and I think we have as an organization, that he is symptom, not cause, of a trend that has really been afflicting the globe over the beginning of the 21st century. Freedom House, which has studied the rise of democracies throughout the world since the end of World War II, has noted that democracy has spread to more countries and improved in the countries it's in since the end of World War II up through about 2005. And then it starts to go in reverse. And what we're witnessing now is that America's not immune to it. So we're out there trying to prevent what's happened in countries like Hungary and Poland from happening here.
Very, very interesting. Trump wants the Attorney General to investigate the identity of the author of the op-ed piece. Was that illegal? Was something criminal about that?
No, there's nothing criminal about what the op-ed piece author did, and I think that's what makes Trump's calls to the Attorney General so disturbing. The greatest power that any government has is the power to deprive its citizens of their liberty. So the notion that the president would threaten investigation or even prosecution against someone who has not done anything illegal is deeply disturbing. That's not to say, though, that the author of the piece hasn't done something problematic. Corruption is a virus, and I think that this author is really a symptom. When I worked in the White House, we all looked up to the example that President Obama set, and I knew I held myself accountable to wanting to exhibit the highest ethical standards in service of my country, because I knew that's what the president expected of me. I think when you're working in a White House like this one, where the president himself is leaking things anonymously to the press, is doing things that are a corrupt use of the powers of his office, it's not surprising that other people in the administration feel they can do the same thing. And we should all be concerned about that in terms of the health of our White House and the health of our democracy.
Should that person morally come forward?
Yes. There are proper channels. If you have concerns at the level that this person seems to have concerns about the sober stewardship of our national government, there are channels for you to address that. And I think the biggest one is Congress. And I think we need to also ask Congress, Senator Ben Sasse told Politico recently that he wasn't surprised by the op-ed because it's similar to things he hears, as he said, 3 times a week from senior White House staff. I think we all need to be asking our members of Congress and our senators, if you're hearing 3 times a week from senior White House staff that the president may be in various ways endangering the stability of the country, isn't it your obligation as a member of a co-equal branch of government, in fact, the one that is tasked with addressing crises like these in executive, to do something about it? And I've asked Senator Sasse on Twitter, I'd like him to answer, what has he done when he's received that information from senior White House staff?
We have a whistleblower law, right?
We do.
Is this person a whistleblower?
Well, they'd have to be able to identify specific behaviors that are defrauding, violating rules, violating law, engaging in waste of the government. So in a legal technical sense, it depends on exactly what it is they have to report. But in a broader sense, they certainly could come forward, be very specific about the things they've seen, and ask members of Congress. They could brief the Gang of 8 in Congress and ask for there to be testimony and hearings on what they've seen and how that might endanger the country. And I think that is the proper channel through which we can resolve what at least this person claims are threats to the stability of the governance of the country.
Does Trump have a point? Is if this guy has special clearances and can affect national security, that he should not be in the White House?
Well, here's an important thing to remember about this anonymous person is this person is a political appointee of President Trump personally. You know, for all those people out there railing against so-called deep state conspiracies, this is not a civil servant. This is someone that at least Donald Trump claimed was one of the best people that he was going to bring into government. So I think what the president needs to be concerned about is why is it that his best people, and he can't even identify which it is, feel this way about his leadership? I run an organization, and if someone wrote this about my leadership in the organization, and I couldn't even narrow down to 100 people who it was, I would think it would be a sign that I'm doing a pretty bad job of running my organization.
Couple of other things, Ian. We hope to have you on again quite a bit. Do you think Mueller how do you think Mueller's doing?
Well, the American people think that he's doing quite a good job. A Fox News poll found that 60% of Americans approve the way that Mueller is handling the investigation, and a CBS poll found that 80% of Americans don't want Donald Trump to interfere in it. And I think the reason for that is clear. The investigation is making headway. It's produced 7 convictions. It's produced 24 indictments. And I think the American people fundamentally understand that in our system of governance, no one is above the law. And we can't, as individual Americans, choose our investigator or our prosecutor or our judge in instances where someone suspects us of doing something wrong. And similarly in this country, neither can the president, which I think is why most Americans want Robert Mueller's investigation to continue, wherever the facts lead, to its ultimate conclusion, and don't want the president to interfere with it, because when he does, even Republicans believe it makes him look guilty.
Mueller has never spoken publicly since this began. Is that wise?
I think he's doing what our law enforcement does, which is apply law to facts without engaging in politics. And I think what's troubling is that the president has not respected that that is the tradition in this country, that we apply an independent application of the rule of law, regardless of fear nor favor of who it helps and who it hurts. And when the president claims to have an absolute right to do whatever he wants with the Department of Justice, it's fundamentally at odds with that tradition. It also happens to violate the Constitution. You know, the president stood in front of all Americans on January 20th, held up his hand and took an oath to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. And that word faithfully matters. The founders didn't pick words willy-nilly to put in the Constitution. They chose that word because it imposes on the president a duty of good faith, to operate in good faith in service of the American public. And when he claims that he has the right to interfere with the Department of Justice, to do things to protect himself or his family or his associates, that's acting in bad faith. And it's a violation of his oath and of the Constitution. I think if he tries to do that, the American people will recognize that we gave him the powers he has to represent us. We can take them back.
Ian, thanks so much for joining us. We hope we have you on quite a few times again.
Thank you for having me.